Please, leave the cloth. Abby's desperate, heart-wrenching scream echoed across the sun-scorched prairie. Her hands seemed to have grown into the filthy piece of fabric that covered her face, and she clung to it with such force as if trying to hold on to something more than just a piece of cloth. She pleaded, her body shaking with silent sobs, but Jake had already begun his movement, slowly, with an inexorable determination, as if carrying out an inevitable sentence. His fingers, rough and calloused, touched the edge of the fabric, and her scream intensified. No, it was no longer a plea, but an order filled with terror. He stopped for a fraction of a second, his own inner world freezing, ready to collapse. Why was he doing this? Why was his seemingly impassive heart beating so fiercely? He was known in these parts as Jackson Jake Harper, a man who knew how to stay out of other people's problems. A man whose soul had been scorched by the cruel desert and old pain. He had seen too much filth and cruelty to believe in anyone's innocence. Jake had stumbled upon the wagon 3 hours ago. Its wheels were shattered, and the wagon itself lay on its side, like the bone of a dead animal abandoned on the blistering sand. The air was filled with the acrid smell of gunpowder, mixed with the sickly scent of blood. The place was a trap. But then he saw her, a woman huddled in a ball under the shade of a rock. She was small and fragile, and there was nothing in her silent grief that seemed feigned. It was then that he noticed the cloth on her face. Dirty, tattered, it completely concealed her features. His cold logic suggested, it's a trick, a lure. But something inside, buried deep beneath layers of cynicism, whispered, help. It was the first time in many years that he had felt anything other than emptiness. Who are you? He asked, his voice dry and hoarse, like cracked earth. Abby, she whispered, not lifting her head. We were robbed. Everything was taken. It was then that her first plea came. Please, leave the cloth. Don't remove it. This request was so unusual that it hooked him. He couldn't understand what could be so terrible under the cloth that she would rather die than show it. All his life he had been running from the pain, from the memories of the day his world was destroyed. The day his wife and young son became victims of a gang that left behind only ashes and a brand on his soul. The journey to the nearest town was long and agonizing, but Jake couldn't abandon her. He put her on his horse, and she clung to him, trembling with fear and cold. Her silence was louder than any words. Why don't you take it off? He asked one day, unable to bear it. I can't, she answered softly. It's too painful. And those words pierced him. He saw himself in her, a person who hides their pain from the whole world. He felt an inexplicable compassion for her, and it scared him. Why her? Why now? When they arrived in town, he decided he had to help her, even if she wouldn't accept the help. He stood before her, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew he was doing something wrong, but he felt he had to do it. He reached out and slowly pulled at the fabric. She screamed again, but it was too late. Jake froze. On her face, from her temple to her chin, was a hideous, dark scar. The same scar Jake had seen on the faces of the bandits who had killed his family. It was known as the Ghost's brand. In an instant, his compassion turned to fury. What do you know? The question was quiet, but it held a hidden threat. Jake drew his pistol and pointed it at her, trembling with anger and betrayal. Abby, whose face was disfigured by the scar, looked up at him. There was no fear in her eyes, only a deep, unbearable weariness. Please, listen to me, she whispered. I was their captive. They brand those who resist them. Their leader, the Punisher, he believes he's a prophet. He thinks God tasked him with cleansing this land of sinners. He and his ghosts aren't just robbers. They're fanatics, and they won't stop until they take over the entire region. Jake felt a wave of rage rising within him. He had been searching for these monsters his whole life, and now he learned that they weren't just killers, but that they were building their empire on blood. He knew he had to stop them before it was too late. He slowly lowered the pistol. I know where they are, Abby whispered. Their camp isn't just a hideout. It's a fortress. They're building fortifications, preparing for war. She paused, then added, they're planning to attack the train. The one that was supposed to bring gold for the railroad construction. If they succeed, they'll have enough money and influence to raise an army and seize power. This was a plan for a full-blown rebellion, and he was right in the middle of it. He looked at Abby, and in her eyes, he saw not fear, but a desperate plea for help. He realized she was his only chance. All right, he said, his voice quiet but firm. I'll believe you, but how can you help me? They know you. Abby smiled. I know them better than they think. I know their habits, their roots, their weaknesses. I'll be your eyes and ears. And you'll be my hand. They left town at dawn. Now there was not only a silent agreement between them, but something more. The journey was long. Abby told him about the brutal traditions of the ghosts, how they initiate new members by branding them so they could never return to a normal life. Jake listened to her, and each story made him even more determined. He was no longer thinking about revenge. Now he was thinking about salvation. One night, as they rested by the campfire, Abby suddenly fell silent. "Over there," she whispered, pointing. "That's them. They're returning from a final route check." Jake hid behind the rocks, and Abby stepped into the open so they would notice her. The Punisher was at the front, his face hidden under a wide sombrero, but Jake recognized him by his walk. Abby approached him, and they spoke. Jake heard her voice, full of desperation, and the Punisher's voice, full of contempt. "Did you think you would escape?" He laughed. "You are mine. Always have been and always will be. We have something for you. Your sister." In that moment, Jake's heart clenched with terror. His sister, he thought she had died in that massacre. But she was alive, and they had her. He realized that now he couldn't just kill the Punisher. He had to save his sister. He fired a shot into the air. The bandits turned, and he, without losing a second, rushed at the Punisher, their bodies intertwined in a deadly dance. But this time, Jake was not just an avenger. He was a savior. He knew he had to win to save his sister. Abby, taking advantage of the chaos, grabbed one of the bandits by the arm. "Where is my sister?" she screamed. "Tell me where she is, or I'll kill you." The bandit, frightened by her anger, told her that Jake's sister was in a nearby settlement where the Punisher held captives. Hearing this, Jake delivered a decisive blow. He knocked the Punisher to the ground and held his pistol to his head. "Where is my sister?" he growled. The Punisher smiled. "Kill me. I've won anyway. She's alone, defenseless, and I'll never tell you where she is." But Abby, who had already managed to break free from the bandit's grasp, whispered in his ear, "She's in the settlement. I was there. It's only a couple of hours from here." Jake turned to Abby. In her eyes, he saw not only the truth but also hope. He realized she was his only hope. He didn't kill the Punisher. He just knocked him out, tied him up, and handed him over to Abby, while he, without losing a minute, galloped toward the settlement. He saved his sister, and they returned to Abby. She stood next to the tied-up Punisher. "What are you going to do?" he asked. Abby looked at the Punisher. There was no hatred in her eyes, only regret. "He's not just a bandit. He's an ideal, and he must stand trial. I want him to see that his ideal was false, that he lost." Jake was stunned by her answer. She didn't want revenge. She wanted justice. And he realized that he had found something more than just an ally. He had found a person who, like him, understood that revenge is not the end of the road. Redemption, forgiveness, and new hope, that was what was most important. They walked through the desert, not as enemies, but as friends. They were broken, but not defeated. And they knew that their path would be long and difficult, but they also knew that they would walk it together. They were two souls who found each other in the vast wilderness, and they were ready to build a new world. Confianza peligrosa. La historia completa version extended a por favor, de la tila. El grito desesperado y desgarrado de Abby Resin en la pradera quemada por el sol. Sus manos parecen habers fusionado con la sucia pizza de tila que cubra su rostro. Y esa afera ella con tanta fuerza como si intentara aferrarse algo más que un simple trozo de tila. Suplic, su cuerpo temblando con solos silenciosos, pero Jake había comenzado su movimiento, lentamente, con una determinación inexorable, como si estuviera cumpliendo una sentencia inevitable. Sus dedos, spiros y calosos, tocaron el borde de la tila, y su grito se intensific. No, ya no era una explica, sino una orden línea de terror. Se detuvo por una fracción de segundo. Su propio mundo interior congeldus, listo para colapsar. ¿Por qué estaba haciendo esto? Porque su corazón, aparentemente impasible, lata con tanta ferocidad. Irreconocido en estos lares como Jackson Jake Harper, en hombre que usaba simo mantenerse al margen de los problemas ajenos. En hombre que alma haba sido abrazada por el cruel desierto y en viejo dolor. Haba visto demasiada inmundicia y crueldad para creer en la inocencia de nadie. Jake se haba tapado con el caramado 3 horas antes. Sus ruedas estaban destrozadas, y el caramado mismo yaca de lado, como el hueso de un animal muerto abandonado en la arena abrasadora. El aire estaba lleno del olor acre de la pavora, mezclado con el dulce aroma de la sangre. El lugar era una trampa. Pero entonces la vio ella. Una mujer curacada boil, a sombra de una roca. Era piquia y fergal. Y no haba nada en su dolor silencioso que pareciera fingido. Few entonces cuando not la tila en su rostro. Sucia, androjosa, ocultaba por completo sus rasgos. Sul dica fra sugera, es un truco, en suelo. Pero algo dentro, enterrado profundamente bio capas de cinismo, susur. Ayuda. Era la primera vez en muchas aos que senta algo miscuveco. Quin airs, pregunt, suvas sica y ronca, como la tierra agrietada. Abi, susurella, sin levantar la cabeza. Nos robaron. Así la veren to do. Few entonces cuando leg su primera explica. Por favor, de la tila. No me la quites. Esta pedicin few tan inusual que lo atrap. No poda entender que podrá ser tan terrible bio la tila que ella preferira morir antes que mostrarlo. Toda su vida haba estado huyendo del dolor. De los recuerdos del día en que su mundo fue destruido. Al día en que su esposo y su pequeño hijo se convirtieron en víctimas de una banda. Una banda que de haters solo cenizas y una marca en su alma. El viaje al pueblo más cercano fue largo y agonizante. Pero Jake no pudo abandonarla. La subí a su caballo. Y ella ese aferre el, temblando de miedo y fro. Su silencio era más fuerte que cualquier palabra. Porque no te la cuidas. Preguntan da, incapaz de soportarlo. No puedo, respondí ella suavemente. Es demasiado doloroso. Y esas palabras lo traspasaron. Así vio es mismo en ella, una persona que es con su dolor del mundo entero. Cindy una compasión inexplicable por ella, y eso lo asust. Por ella, ahora, cuando llegaron al pueblo, decidí que tenía que ayudarla. Incluso si ella no aceptaba la ayuda. Así par frente a ella, su corazón latiendo con fuerza en su pecho. Sabe que estaba haciendo algo mal. Pero sente que tenía que hacerlo. Extendí la mano y lentamente tiró la tila. Ella volvió a gritar, pero ya era demasiado tarde. Jake se quedó paralizado. En su rostro, desde la sien hasta la barbilla, haba una cicatriz horrible y oscura. La misma cicatriz que Jake haba visto en los rostros de los bandidos que habían matado a su familia. Era conocida como la marca del fantasma. En un instante, su compasión se convirtió en furia. ¿Qué sabes? La pregunta era tranquila, pero contiene una amenaza oculta. Jake sacó su pistola y la apuntó hacia ella, temblando de aire y traición. Abby, cuyo rostro estaba desfigurado por la cicatriz, lo miró. No haba miedo en sus ojos, solo un profundo y insoportable cansancio. Por favor, Esham, susur. Fu su cautiva. Marcan a los que se resisten. Solder, al castigador. Cree que es un profeta. Piensa que Dios le ha encomendado la tarea de limpiar esta tierra de pecadores. Y sus fantasmas no son solo ladrones. Son fánticos, y no así detendern hasta que se apodieran de toda la región. Jake sintió una oleada de rabia subir dentro de él. Haba estado buscando estos monstruos toda su vida. Y ahora se enteraba de que no eran solo asesinos, sino que estaban construyendo su imperio sobre la sangre. Sabe que tenía que detenerlos antes de que fuera demasiado tarde. Lentamente bajó la pistola. Din est, susur Abby. Su campamento no es solo un escondite. Es una fortaleza. Construyendo fortifications, preparandos para la guerra. Hizo una pausa, y luego agreg, planean atacar el tren. Al que se supone que traerá oro para la construcción del ferrocarril. Si lo logran, tendrán suficiente dinero y influencia para levantar un ejército y tomar el poder. Este era un plan para una rebelión en toda regla, y él estaba justo en el centro de ella. Mira a Abby, y en sus ojos, no vio miedo, sino una desesperada explicada ayuda. Así dao cuenta de que ella era su única oportunidad. Bien, Dio, su voz tranquila pero firme. Te creer, pero si no puedes ayudarme. Ellos te conocen. Abby sonri. Los conozco mejor de lo que creen. Conozco sus hechos, sus rutas, sus debilidades. Ciertos ojos y desodos. Te sears mi mano. De en el pueblo al amanecer. Ahora haba no solo un acuerdo silencioso entre ellos, sino algo más. El viaje fue largo. Abby le consabra las brutales tradiciones de los fantasmas. Simo inician e los nuevos miembros marcándolos para que nunca pueden volver una vida normal. Jake la escucha. Y cada historia lo haca en mis determinado. Yo no pensaba en la venganza. Ahora pensaba en la salvación. Una noche, mientras descansaban junto a la fogata, Abby de repente se qued en silencio. Al silando. Son ellos. Vuelven de una títima revisión de la ruta. Jake se esconde detrás de los rocas, y Abby sale en claro para que la vieran. El castigador iba al frente, su rostro escondido bajo un sombrero de ala ancha, pero Jake lo reconoce por su forma de caminar. Abby se acerca el y hablaron. Jake escucha su voz, llena de desesperación, y la voz del castigador, llena de desprecio. Pensáis que escaparás. Así ri, eres mal. Siempre lo has sido y siempre lo seres. Tenemos algo para ti. Tu hermana. En ese momento, el corazón de Jake se encogió de terror. Su hermana, pens que había muerto en ese massacre. Pero estaba viva. Y ellos la tienen. Se dio cuenta de que ahora no puede simplemente matar al castigador. Tiene que salvar a su hermana. Dispara al aire. Los bandidos se darán la vuelta, y él, sin perder un segundo, se abalan sobre el castigador. Sus cuerpos se entrelazaron en una danza mortal. Pero esta vez, Jake no era solo un vengador, era un salvador. Sabe que tiene que ganar para salvar a su hermana. Abby, aprovechando el caos, agarró de los bandidos por el brazo. ¿Dónde es mi hermana? Grit. ¿Dónde esto te mato? El bandido, asustado por su aire, le dijo que la hermana de Jake estaba en un asentamiento cercano donde el castigador retenía a los cautivos. Al escuchar esto, Jake asiste un golpe.